Welcome back to Policy Matters. My name is Dustin Geverlow. I'm your host, and with us today we have North Dakota Agriculture Commissioner Doug Goehring. Good afternoon, Doug. How are you doing?
Hey, good afternoon, Dustin. I'm doing well, thank you.
Well, this weekend we've got the State Republican Convention, and basically it comes down to the only real action in the convention is in your race with a gal from Eastern North Dakota named Judy Estison, who is challenging you for the Republican Convention's nomination for your seat. And we had her on earlier discussing her issues and just getting right into it. What she brings up is the issue of regulation. And basically she's accusing you of wanting to overregulate and promote more regulation. She brings up issues like the animal cruelty bill and the Extraordinary Places bill, the Extraordinary Places discussion in the Industrial Commission. What would your response to the accusation of wanting to overregulate North Dakota's agriculture and industrial environment?
Well, first of all, I don't write the laws. They are either federal laws or they are state laws. We are a regulatory agency that is instructed to implement those laws. Now, how you regulate is another story, and one of the things that we do that's very unique throughout the entire United States is we used a risk-based strategy and education compliance. We do outreach with the regulated community to help them understand what they have to do to comply. Now, that doesn't exist anyplace else in the entire United States, Dustin. First of all, we don't play the gotcha game like EPA and USDA and FDA do. We go in, do outreach, we show them what they need to do instead of just throwing a manual at them like EPA does, and we show them why it's important, these things that are federal laws and these things that are state laws, what needs to take place, how it needs to happen, and then we work with them on 2 or 3 visits to make sure that they get everything in place that they need to do, and then we come back and do inspections and help them to comply. With that being said, we have an 84% compliance rate in the nation. EPA runs in the high 40s. Most of the states, my colleagues, run in the 50s and low 60s. This is a great story to tell. In fact, we have been talking with EPA over the last couple of years about adopting this model and quit playing the gotcha game because it doesn't help anybody. If it really is about helping people comply, then work with them to help them comply. And that's what our approach is here in the department. It works well. The regulated community has come back to us on numerous occasions asking us to actually take over programs, get them away from EPA, because we take a pragmatic, common sense approach and work with the regulated community to help them come into compliance. Concerning the issue on animal cruelty, that's been a strange one. I've heard comments like, apparently I invited HSUS into the state. Well, first of all, I didn't invite them in. I can't necessarily stop them from coming in. They came in and worked with a group. I'm not even sure what the group was that then pushed a measure a couple years ago, and they lost. But I supported and worked with in the ag community and another coalition. It was made up of Farmers Union, Farm Bureau, North Dakota Stockmen's, the North Dakota Veterinary Medical Association, the Board of Animal Health, Dakota Zoo, a couple of local pet shelters, one out of Bismarck-Mandan, the other one out of Fargo-Moorhead, just to address concerns that they had. They wanted to get out in front of this thing and show that North Dakotans can decide their own future and their own destiny and their own fate. And they knew there were some things they wanted to address, had to address, and they did. I provided them resources. I provided them an attorney. I provided them my state vets, helped find meeting places. So I know that some people had some consternation over that, but you know what? That's what the ag community wanted. That's what this entire coalition wanted. And we supported their efforts, and they actually drafted and developed a bill that went forward to the legislature. The only thing that I played a more direct role in was the first 4 meetings. They had me facilitate those meetings to kind of get everybody on the same page, because I got drug into this 2 years prior to that, so almost 4 years ago, before the legislature met, when there was a group that got together and talked about some of their concerns, and the ag community got rolled over, and that's when I intervened just to have them have a voice. After those first 4 initial meetings, the Stockmans actually took over and chaired the meeting, and they worked with everybody to develop language that they wanted to move forward to the legislature. The legislature actually drafted, put together their version, and that's what went before the legislature itself. And during that period of time, because we do oversee and enforce some aspects of animal cruelty in our state, especially for animal agriculture, I was asked to go down and testify and talk about the process and address some of those concerns. The coalition asked me, and there was an expectation from legislators that I would be there. Now, whether people liked that because I showed up, well, this office and this chair is owned by the people of North Dakota, and it was the right thing to do. It isn't owned by one particular group or entity out there. So I did my job as a constitutional office holder, and I'd do it again. I do not appreciate HSUS. I don't want HSUS here. I thought it was very responsible of the coalition for what they did, and that's why I supported them. Concerning the issue on extraordinary places, that is interesting in itself. I've had reporters say, so you got to tell me what's the issue with this whole private property rights, because whether we agree with you or not, we've been in those industrial commission meetings. We know where you stand. How is this getting twisted to say that you're not for private property rights? And I've shrugged my shoulders, threw my arms up in the air, because I'm not sure. I was the one that forwarded and proposed the amendment that took private land out of public comment in extraordinary places. I felt it had no bearing, no place to be there, simply based on the fact that if we would do that, we would allow that in that policy that the Industrial Commission was considering, that sets precedent. And all of a sudden, does that mean the public gets to comment whether there's cows grazing out there, whether there's a combine out there, a tractor, a grain bin, a wind turbine? I mean, it's a slippery slope, and it's someplace we didn't need to go. The Industrial Commission did adopt it unanimously to strike that language and make sure that we protect private property owners, that the public will not have comment on private land. The public will have the ability to comment on public land. And in fact, prior to that, they did have the opportunity and the ability to comment on public land. They just had to go to the land managers such as Game and Fish, Fish and Wildlife, Forest Service, BLM, any of those entities out there, state or federal, that manage land, they would take comments from the public. Now we kind of convoluted and made this a little messy, because we almost give the public equal standing with those federal agencies and those state agencies that are responsible for managing that land by allowing them to get involved in that hearing process, which really complicates things. For example, the Forest Service goes to great lengths, painstakingly lengths, to deal with, for example, operators, oil and gas, pipeline companies, about putting in place some logical, methodical, or method in which they would build roads out there, put in pipelines, where they put tank batteries, where they'd like to see well pads put. And if they go to a permit hearing, and now all of a sudden the public is not happy with what they're proposing in this permit hearing, now you got a whole new element to it, because it could complicate how something's going to be permitted. It could actually slow it down and stop it, even though those land managers like Forest Service have already went to great lengths to make sure they're addressing all the concerns. They want to minimize impact, and they want to mitigate risk also. And that's the first step before it actually comes to the Industrial Commission or to the Department of Mineral Resources to look at the permitting process and then take into consideration all those other things about watersheds, about soils, topography, where there might be a military installation, where there's wells, wetlands, bodies of water, everything like that.
It was curious to me, the accusation that somehow you invited someone in to talk about an issue when, it kind of implies that you have the power to keep someone out. And frankly, I think everybody should resent that kind of thinking, because no matter how extreme someone is or a group is, they get the same First Amendment rights as anyone to be part of the process. So it kind of was odd, but I think one angle of that discussion when it came to Measure 5, I believe it was, on the 2012 ballot, as well as extraordinary places, is the issue of whether the Republican majority, both in the legislature and in the statewide level, when it comes to the Industrial Commission, and setting itself when it opposes some of these measures and opposes some of these bills by saying, you don't have to vote for this, we're going to do something later, and sets itself up to push a law later on without actually knowing what the plan is, and trying to cut the other guys off at the pass. And I wonder, do you have an opinion as to whether sometimes the approach in fighting these extremist concepts of saying you don't have to vote for that, we'll do something later, without knowing what that something is, do you think that puts you and other Republican officials and other state officials in a bad position?
Well, it certainly can, and I think that's where it really takes a lot of communication and working with, all those that are involved. And that means if you have stakeholders that are impacted, they should get together and talk about it and meet with legislators, even if it's, in the interim, because there may need to be some action that needs to be taken so we don't get in a horrible situation. Because just saying we'll deal with it later, maybe you got to have a pretty good idea of where stakeholders are at. We've heard that before. Just, well, I'll give you one. Obamacare. Remember what Congress said, and some people in Congress said, just pass it and we'll figure it out later. Well, this kind of comes down to the same thing. Don't worry about it, we'll just pass it later. I applaud those that step up and try to be proactive, because those are the ones that are really impacted. And I think they gave a lot of thought. In many respects, we see it in water, policy, and some of the attacks that are going on against agriculture concerning Clean Water Act, because it's easy to point a finger at agriculture because it's a non-point source and say you're the problem, when in reality we start drilling down and looking at some of the science, looking at some of the watersheds, and we find out in some cases agriculture is not even a part of that. So agriculture has been coming together to talk about these issues and say, hey, wait a minute, we are part of this, and we're ones that use the water, we're ones next to the water. We can look at best management practices. We can look at things that we need to do because we are responsive and we are responsible, and I'll give that to agriculture. You want to talk about a resilient group of people, noble, salt of the earth. They just don't like when they're being attacked unfairly or accused of things that there's no scientific basis for. But they will step up and respond, and they'll be responsible, and I give it to North Dakota agriculture producers and our rural citizens. They've done that time and time again, and it's just great working for them and serving them.
Getting back to the race for the nomination at the convention this weekend, on the issue of the Farm Bureau's involvement, is there any comment that you would like to make on how they've handled themselves and their involvement in this whole process?
Well, I think it's a bit unfortunate. Oh, no, it is unfortunate that it's become personal. It started out a long time ago, and on a few different areas. Probably the biggest one is just on policy. I've supported the Farm Bill. They did not. They came in my office when their measure was up a couple years ago and said, how come you're not supporting us? We gave you money. And I said, well, I have supported you. I don't know what you're referring to. Well, on our measure. And I said, well, I can neither oppose or support a constitutional measure as a constitutional office holder, or no government entity can. If the media, journalists ask me a question about clarification or an opinion about how I think that may work, that's different. But I can neither support or oppose or use resources to do such a thing. And it took a little while, but it seemed to finally resonate, or I thought they understood it. But then it went on to issues such as, I said, the Farm Bill, then the animal cruelty thing, where they tried making some big issue out of that, which I'm still not clear on, and then this extraordinary places. And I think because policy doesn't carry well, they tried to find other avenues and ways of just making it an issue, and I'm getting spanked because of my policy positions. And, competition is a good thing. It helps you refine, it helps you become better. But I think under the circumstances that this has happened, it's been really skewed because of the innuendos, the untruths, and the misrepresentation, the way that this all happened. That is, I don't believe, ethical or proper, but, it's the United States of America, and people have the right to work and run in that arena. So that's where we're at. I stand on my record. We have a lot of accomplishments in this office. We've done a lot of things in the last 5 years, and I'm very proud of it. I'm very proud of my staff. I'm very proud of the fact that I cover with my staff about 80 boards, commissions, task force, committees, councils. We run over 104 different programs in this department with 77 employees. Boy, talk about workload, and you talk about how well we do it. Yeah, we do it well. We continue to advocate for agriculture, and we regulate in a very responsible manner and a balanced approach.
Well, and your statement about how the law prohibits elected officials and public officials from officially campaigning against measures, I can reinforce that because I was involved in strengthening the law in the 2011 legislative session to extend that prohibition to ballot measures as well as candidates, and it certainly was the intent to keep public state dollars and local government dollars away from promoting ballot measures both at the state level and the local level. With just a couple minutes left here, Commissioner Goehring, one final question. If the worst case scenario in your perspective happens and the convention endorses your competition, Judy Estison, do you intend to place your name on the June primary ballot?
I get asked that quite often. And I guess, here's my thing. I am seeking the Republican endorsement, and I know the whole issue's been raised about Keith Bierke, Kent Jones, and Sarah Vogel from some 24 or 25 years ago. I am not going to split the vote. Now, if push comes to shove and let's say there was an upset at the convention because it's a small fraction, a small segment of the party, and they stack delegates, I'm going to consider very strongly about going to the primary, because in the primary you get all the Republicans, you get a cross-section of the North Dakota, and it's all about name recognition, and that I have across the state of North Dakota, and most people aren't falling victim, or I should say a lot of people are not falling victim to this misrepresentation of my record or the work I've done.
Right, and as 2012 showed with Congressman Kramer going to the primary and ignoring what the Republican convention decides doesn't necessarily hurt a candidate. Thank you for joining us today, Commissioner Goehring, and we hope to speak with you in the future.
Thank you very much, Dustin. You have a great afternoon and a great weekend.
You too. Joining us next will be Steve Bakken, host of Energy Matters, for a quick wrap-up and analysis of the state agriculture race at the North Dakota Republican Convention. Stay with us.